Well, guys, that let us get to Friday again, so that means it's time for another podcast episode. If this is your first time listening, this is not like the regular videos. This is much more casual and more conversational. So for this episode, I thought I'd go back to an entity that I spoke about before called the Glimmer Man. Now some people are going to think that Steven Seagal is going to be the subject of this, but no, not him. A long time ago, somebody commented on a video where I had a couple encounters with the Glimmer Man and called him the Glizzy Man, so I thought that was pretty funny too. But where the name originally comes from, I don't really know. But this entity is unusually strange, because no one has seen what it actually looks like. The creature appears like the alien from the movie Predator when it's cloaked. I've seen some strange things out in the woods myself, but never quite something like that. And I don't know about you, but for me, seeing a cryptid or some other entity out in the woods is scary enough. But in this case, you're not really seeing exactly what it looks like or how horrible it looks. It's always the outline of a person, or usually a person. Sometimes it's not even out in the woods. I have one where it came right inside someone's house. So as per usual with the podcast now, I have a few articles up and I'll link those in the description below, so you can check them out if you want to. So yeah, in my opinion, it's almost scarier when you know something is there but you can't see it. Or you can see just the outline of it, and it knows you can see it, and it just adds a whole nother level of creepy and dread. So this first one right here, a guy was turkey hunting back in the early 2000s, and he says that he encountered one of these beings in Iowa. He also says that he was an experienced hunter, that he had been doing this for years, and as you can imagine, being an experienced hunter, you're pretty familiar with most of the sounds that come out of the woods, even the weird ones, because sometimes that weird sound or sound that's making the hair on the back of your neck stand up, that can be a bird, or a fox, or a coyote. It can be just the smallest thing. But in this case, he says that he sighted something called the Glimmer Man. So he says when you're turkey hunting, you have to be completely camouflaged. You sit down in the woods for hours, usually against a tree or another backdrop. And after hours of sitting like this, you kind of get to hear every sound of the animals, sounds of the trees, leaves crunching beneath a squirrel's feet, things like that. And as he was sitting there, experiencing this, it was like a switch flipped, and all of the sound just disappeared from the woods like a vacuum. Usually, this is the sign of a large predator that's coming into the area. So he sat there, listening, waiting, was completely still, or as still as he could be, and then he began to hear something, a clicking noise, and it kept repeating, almost mechanically. In nature, every interval, every noise was exactly the same as the next. Now as a hunter, hearing a noise like this that can be unfamiliar, you're going to be looking around, trying still to make as least amount of noise as possible, but you're going to be moving your eyes side to side, up and down, around, and after 20 minutes, he couldn't find the source of it. He started to get this uneasy feeling, and finally got up from the ground and started to just say, I'm just gonna go back to my truck. And now sometimes with the Glimmer Man, this is common. People have reported hearing a weird mechanical noise. Sometimes it's clicking or sometimes it's grinding, but there's usually some kind of noise, but not always. It really seems to differ for every experience. Now although he didn't specifically see the Glimmer Man during this time, he believes that one was around him because of the dread, of the feeling that he was being watched, and of the sound of footsteps that were not his own. So with that first one, do you really think that there was something in the trees that was following him, or someone or something that was invisible that was following him? Or do you think that he let the sounds of the forest just kind of get to him? But this next one's a little different. A little closer to a house, and not out in the dead middle of the woods. It was 1984, and the guy was 13 years old in North Carolina. So where he lives, there's a long driveway that leads to a mailbox. He was told to go out and get the mail, and while going out there, he didn't really notice anything different. He got the mail, as per usual, and was taking his time walking back up the driveway. And while he was just kinda screwing around, walking along, he noticed something. The dark outline of a man crouched at the tree line, watching him. He could see its eyes that were kind of glinting, and besides the eyes, he could see straight through it. After seeing this, he took off running up the driveway. Whatever it was then standing at the end of the driveway near the road. In the time he was running, he did not hear it run from one spot to the other, but nevertheless, there it was. In the case of this, he says that he held on to the story for so long because there was no word for it. They didn't exactly have the GLIMMERMAN back then, but later on, he saw the Predator movie and was like, that's it, that's what I saw. Which even then, you can't exactly go around telling people that you saw the outline of a person that you could see straight through. That's a good way for people to think you're crazy. And to be honest, I don't blame them for running. I don't blame anybody for seeing something like this and just being like, well, see you later, and then just skedaddling the hell out of there. Don't blame anybody for doing that. In fact, I remember one story that I talked about on the channel. This might have been 3 years ago now, maybe 2, where it was a similar sighting, but it was out in a field. A guy was standing near a barn. This barn in particular was abandoned, I believe. I believe it was from the previous owners of this property, and his family had built a new barn, or maybe I'm recalling it wrong, but he used to play by this old barn, just to be alone, have his own little kind of hideaway space. And one day, he was out there when he heard something running toward him. He spun around and was searching for whatever was running toward him, but all he could see was the footprints and the grass. The grass was moving like somebody was running through it, and as soon as it got right up to him, whatever it was grabbed him by the shirt or the throat, I don't remember, and held him up against the barn. By this point, he could see the outline of it. In this case, there was no clicking or mechanical noise. It was just the sound of, I guess, wind that wasn't actually there. And as he was kicking and fighting this thing, at some point, it just seemed to just let him go and run in a different direction. It's hard to say what its intentions were. Maybe its intentions were just to scare the hell out of him. I know that with a lot of entities, especially ones that are a little more on the strange side, they kind of get off on scaring the hell out of you. It's like they take it for energy. It's their fuel source. And they do this in the same way that a poltergeist or a demon would. I'm not saying that that's what they are. I just mean that they seem to have the same things in mind for us. You don't exactly hear someone have one of these encounters and come back saying it was great. But moving on to our next encounter. This woman was 5 years old when her first encounter occurred. It was the fall. It was southern Illinois. It was not too far from the Cahokia Mounds. She said she was out looking for arrowheads at the edge of the woods behind her grandmother's house. She said, quote, "I had been out there for quite a while because I remember I had a pretty decent-sized hole going when something caught my eye up in the tree that I was next to. I almost don't know how to explain it, but it looked like almost a heat wave coming off the branch of the tree. I'm staring at this, quote, heat wave and realize that's a human shape. It was a human being. So here I am, 5 years old, and wondering why there's an invisible man in the tree. I remember feeling scared, but unsure of what to do. Then it started moving and making a faint clicking sound. She ran inside. As you can imagine, this was very terrifying for her, especially at such a young age. But 7 years later, she watched the movie The Predator, and she finally had an accurate description for the phenomenon she witnessed that day. Now, fast forward to 2004. She has children of her own. She moved into a new apartment on the outskirts of a town. there was a small wooded area nearby. She said one night that she was up late doing laundry and other stuff that parents do after the kids go to bed. She stepped outside to take a smoke break before bed. And while she's out on her back porch, she starts to hear something. The same clicking noise that I mentioned before in these other encounters. At the time, she initially expected another visit from a groundhog that she'd encountered, but she says she didn't see a groundhog or any movement from the ditch. So she goes back to her cigarette, thinking it's nothing. The faint clicking sound keeps happening, and there's a slight shift in movement that made her look up into the tree that's left of her porch. And the same thing that she saw when she was a kid was there. But this time, instead of describing it like a heat wave, she described it as more of a distortion that's in a humanoid shape. It was crouched down on the branch with an arm out that held on to the trunk of the tree. She couldn't believe her eyes. She thought, is this actually happening? Has it come to kill me for seeing it all those years ago? She turned and ran inside her apartment, locking all the doors and windows and turning off all the lights. Then, she attempted to get a stealthy glimpse out the darkened living room window, but now there was nothing there. Now, in a situation like this, you may tell yourself that you're just tired, that it's some kind of repressed stress thing, and you're seeing things. But in this case, that gets dispelled when she sees her neighbor's dog running across the yard and start barking at the same tree and looking up at the same branch that she had seen this thing on. She said that this dog was not a noisy dog, and that she had actually never heard the dog bark at anything, but here it was, out there barking for minutes, until the neighbor lady who owned the dog called the dog back inside. The dog reluctantly went back to its owner, stopping every few feet to look back at the branch of the tree. And she said that after seeing it this time, she never saw it again. She didn't get much sleep that night, but she never saw it again. And that one kind of makes me wonder if certain entities like this can mark people, like they can follow them wherever they go, or if they just are continually following them, kind of in the background and where they can't see them. I don't know which one is creepier. What do you think? Being followed the whole time, or something that marks you so that it can just kind of show up no matter where you are? I suppose they're both really creepy now that I think of it, but let me know what you think. And this next one is from all the way in Australia. At the time of the sighting, he was quite young, and his mother had went to the hospital with bad asthma. And while his dad was outside getting wood for the fire, he was inside, jumping on the bed. He said he was looking at the crack in the door between the hinges to the kitchen. The kitchen light lit up the bedroom just enough so that he could see a black silhouette. The silhouette, of course, caught the little kid's eye. It was standing right behind the door next to the bed that he was jumping on, staring directly at him. He says it was a black, glimmering mirage. He keeps looking at the crack where the light shone through. He said his guts came into his throat. Fear had frozen him. And then he heard his dad's boots on the back step coming up the veranda, and the thing was just gone without a blink. As soon as his attention left the thing, it disappeared. He says it was as tall as the bedroom door. In a situation like this, it's not something that's out in the middle of the woods. It's not something that's in kind of a rural community, or like at the end of a long driveway with woods on one side. This was right in somebody's house. So what exactly do you think these are? I've heard some people say that they think that it's a Bigfoot that's using a cloaking form or something, but a lot of times, they're human height. And I half wonder if like the sound of clicking or a grinding sound that people hear is like the sound of some machine running. That could be a schizo theory, I don't know. But we're also talking about invisible people here, so we're already kind of down the rabbit hole of crazy things. And one question I would also have to ask that I didn't really find an answer to because there's just so many of these. I wonder how many of them are close to like an army base or an air force base or some kind of lab. Not saying they're related, I'm just saying that I'm kind of like that guy from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, just like doing the red yarn, connecting the dots here. But I have another one. This one was from back in 2000. It was actually at an Air Force base. He says it was in the year 2000, and that at the time there was a shortage of security police, and he was made into a temporary security police officer at this base in the southwest. He said he was patrolling the National Guard side of the base. There was another airman with him when they saw that the lights were on in an office building that they had just passed moments before, and when they passed it before, the lights were off. They went inside. There was a long hallway, and out of one of the rooms, this big, invisible, predator-like creature came out and started moving rapidly toward them. The airman ahead of him was ahead of him by about 10 feet, moved over and made himself flat against the wall as it passed by him. The thing ran right past him and was coming right at the person telling the story. The other airman yelled, "Get out of the way." The guy did at the last second, and the thing moved past him rapidly. There was a strong gust of wind behind this thing after it passed him, and then it just disappeared down the hallway. And whenever he tells people, they, of course, don't believe him. And I'm not saying that it's like some kind of government experiment, or if it's something like that. I just think it's weird how a lot of this stuff seems to happen around bases. But with that, let me know what you think. What is the Glimmer Man? Is Steven Seagal or Arnie involved? Of course that last one is just a joke, but what do you actually think it is? How do you think it's able to just come into people's houses? So, if it can do that, it doesn't mean that it needs an invitation. It can just do that if it wants to, which is a whole other level of terrifying, because a house is like your space, your energy. And of course, if you had an experience with one of these things, let me know. I'd love to hear about it. And with that, I think I will see you on Sunday. I hope you enjoy these short little podcasts, and if you do, I'm going to keep doing them, so I hope you enjoy them. But yeah, I'll see you Sunday. Make sure to tune in for that video, because it's also pretty crazy. So, I'll see you then. Thank you for pulling up a stump, and make sure to follow the 3 H's of the channel. Have a good weekend.